guys, my name is Sid. Welcome to another vlog, and in this room is probably the best Apple retro collection that I've ever seen in my life, and probably one of the best Apple retro collections in the world. I mean, Jimmy over here has almost every single Apple computer that was ever made, including this Apple One computer, which is insured for over $1 million dirhams because it's actually a working Apple One. This room has more than $1 million worth of old Apple retro equipment. So today we're going to take a look into the history of Apple and look at some of the machines that made today's modern computing possible. So the Apple One, as you can see, came as a motherboard. This is how they sold it, and this is what actually got Apple its seed funding in order to go on and create the Apple II, which was really their big seller. This was sold in computer hobbyist shops. And as you can see, there's a picture over here of Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak playing with the first Apple One. This is what really started Apple in the first place. So here you can see how the Apple One used to work. You'd have to connect an external keyboard, an external monitor over here as well. This over here is how you would load media onto this computer. So it's actually a tape, like a cassette tape kind of thing, which would connect through this connector over here, and then you would be able to type in commands and get stuff from this tape disc. And this was kind of the first consumer computer because it was cheap enough where people could buy it. Before this, computers used to be massive and very expensive and not available to the public. So that kind of changed things, even though it looks really crude over here, but it really made a big difference. Now this over here is the Apple II. Now this was Apple's most popular computer. Once they raised funding, they were able to mass produce these things, and this really catapulted Apple into the company that it was in the 80s. This again was a consumer-friendly computer. As you can see, it's relatively small. It's not that big at all, and this was one of the first computers that was easily portable as well. You could carry this thing with you, and it was quite easy to program for. Apple sold a lot of these computers in their time, and this really took the company to the next phase over here, which was the Lisa. This is the Lisa computer. As you can see, it has a graphical user interface and a mouse. Famously, Steve Jobs went to Xerox and saw the mouse in action, and he said that Apple computers must have this, and that's how the Lisa came into being. Now, Lisa is also the name of Steve Jobs' daughter, and apparently that was why he named this computer the Lisa. This was a big project for Steve Jobs, but unfortunately, it wasn't very successful for Apple. The computers were extremely expensive to buy. Just not that many people bought it, but they did make a lot of publicity because of the graphical user interface. And to this date, this is how we use computers, with a mouse and a keyboard and a graphical user interface. So this really started the whole graphical user interface revolution. And finally, we come to this, the first Apple Mac. As you can see, it's a really small computer. It's portable. I could lift this thing up. Again, had a graphical user interface. And very famously, it was able to talk during Steve Jobs' keynote.
I'd like to let Macintosh speak for itself.
Hello, I am Macintosh. It sure is great to get out of that bag.
Now, Apple spent a lot of money to be able to make the Mac. It wasn't that big a success for Apple because of the price of these machines. It was quite expensive. Eventually, this became a success for Apple. They were selling this and the Apple II at the same time, and the Apple II was outselling the Mac. But eventually people came around to the amazing graphical user interface. Let me show you the refresh rate of this monitor. This computer actually had cut copy paste a long time before the iPhone got cut copy paste. Now this over here is an original Apple One. As I said, this was in the box. The one we saw earlier was a replica, but Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak probably had their hands on this. So this is 1 out of 75 Apple Ones that is working in the world. And these things auction for over $1 million to 2 million dirhams. So here you can see the collection of Macintosh PowerBooks. Now, Apple was one of the first to come up with this clamshell design for a computer laptop. And these were some of the first few that came out. And you can see this one is a portable Mac as well. I think this one was the first one. And all these are in working condition, by the way. which is pretty spectacular. But yeah, so as you can see, they had a trackball mouse over here, click buttons, keyboard right below that, a screen. Laptops still look like this, which is a testament how forward-thinking Apple actually was with this design. On this side, you can see a collection of the different Macs. So these were the oldest, and as they progressed over the years, it came right to here. And they had some strange models of Macs as well. This one has a vertical screen on it. Here you can see a very unique Apple computer. This was made in collaboration with Bose. So you can see there's a Bose sign over here. And Bose actually took care of the power and the sound for this system. It was meant to be a multimedia computer. It came with a remote control as well as a keyboard and this all-in-one kind of design. But this turned out to be a flop for Apple. Even though the design looks really cool, not too many people bought this machine. Now this over here is the next computer. If you guys don't know, Steve Jobs was ousted from Apple after the failure of the Mac and went off to create his own company, which was Next. So these were the Next computers. Very famously, they had a cube design for their CPUs, and they built their own operating system for Next, which was then reacquired by Apple. That's how Steve Jobs came back into Apple and became the CEO. And they used a lot of the operating system that they had built for Next and put that into Mac OS X. This over here was an incredible machine for Apple because this was the first iMac. Steve Jobs and Johnny Ive came up with this design for the Apple iMac. And as you can see, it had this candy kind of look. This one's a very unique one. I haven't seen this color before, but this was the more popular color, a teal. They had a pink, they had an orange. They had 12 different colors for this. This collection is not complete as yet. He just has 4 of them. This was a big hit for Apple. So it kind of reinvigorated Apple to its former glory. And since then, Apple hasn't looked back. So before the iPhone came out, Apple tried building many different kinds of handheld devices. This was the Newton, which was famously a huge flop for Apple. This was quite ahead of its time actually. It had things like handwriting recognition and many other features, but people didn't really buy too many of these. And as soon as Steve Jobs came back into the company, he mixed the whole Newton program. But as you can see, Apple made quite a few different styles of the Newton. Now this is a very cool device. So this was the original iBook, and it came out 2 years after the iMac came out. And this again was a huge hit for Apple. It was an ultra portable laptop. It had the same cool design elements to it. And Apple kind of moved into this whole transparent style. You know, it's still quite a compact laptop considering the time at which it came out. Different colors really made it stand out from any other kind of laptop and really made this Apple logo a lot more popular. I remember as a kid looking at these laptops and thinking, wow, those are some cool looking computers. Might look pretty retro right now, but back in the day, they looked amazing. These were the G4 laptops that came out from Apple. So this was the next generation of iBook, a lot sleeker. You can see the whole white design language that came out from Apple at the time. And they kind of changed the whole look to this. This was around the same time that iPods and stuff started coming out. So this whole glossy white finish came out. But Apple was still using PowerPC, so you can see this is a G4 iBook. And very soon after that, they switched to Intel. Now this MacBook was the first MacBook that came out with an Intel processor inside it. And before this, all the computers that Mac used to make used to work on PowerPC, which was a different kind of processor compared to the Intel processors, which are running on x86. When Apple finally decided to move into Intel, people could run Windows on these machines in boot camp. So that was a big advantage, and PowerPC just couldn't keep up with the pace at which Intel was innovating. So the Intel processors started getting faster than the Macs. So it was a bit of a transition period for Apple where they switched from PowerPC to Mac, but this was one of the first few laptops that came out with an Intel processor inside it. They did have the glowing logos, which they've lost now, but very cool laptop. These were super popular and they went pretty cheap as well. I think this started at about $1,000 or $1,200. It really brought the price of a MacBook down. Then of course came the biggest change for Apple, which was this thing. This is the original iPhone, and when I'm holding it in my hands right now, it feels absolutely tiny. But I remember when it came out, it actually felt like a large phone. So here, for example, you can see this Sony Ericsson phone. This is what people were kind of used to carrying around as cell phones before the iPhone came out. Compared to this Sony, this iPhone looks gigantic. Interesting thing about the Sony Ericsson was that Steve Jobs used to use a similar device and he couldn't sync his contacts or make this work with his Apple computer. So this is one of the first phones that had the capability of syncing with an Apple computer. Now, of course, this design is a classic, and from here we got the current smartphones that we have right now. But as you can see, Apple took a huge journey to reach here. It took years of iteration over different kinds of computer models, from the Apple I to the Apple II, then the Lisa, the Mac, then laptops, iBooks, iPods, and then finally the iPhone. It was just such an amazing experience to see all these different machines over here and see the history of Apple all in one place. I'll leave a link to Jimmy's Twitter handle so you guys can check out more photographs of this amazing collection that he has over here. If you like this video, hit that like button, leave me a comment, subscribe to watch more videos like this. Let me know what you think of this amazing collection, and I'll see you guys in the next one.